Hello, this is jAyMaC, and in this tutorial I'm going to teach you how to make filthy growl basses. Here's a preview of what we'll be making. Well, it's the growl that hits at the start of every 2 bars. I'll just isolate it for you so you can hear it on its own. It's that growl there. And I will be teaching you how to do that. It's actually composed of 3 parts. 1 is a massive patch, 2 is a Sytrus patch, and 3 is an EQ morphing sort of, where'd I put it? Hang on. It's an EQ, parametric EQ sort of automation that I just sort of made. Anyway, firstly, the massive patch. It's when massive unfreezes. Okay, wait. Yeah, okay. It's a patch that I made a while ago, actually. It's called, well, I called it Growl Nasty Wub Wub, because that's what it sounds like. Anyway, you only use 1 oscillator, and I could probably just, yeah, these are turned off anyway, so, no. Yeah. Okay, so what it is, it's basically an, it's an AI wavetable in Ben minus plus. Yeah. How about, I'll just remake this in another instance of massive for you now. I don't know why, but massive always takes forever to load on here. Anyway, what you do is you begin by clicking File and New Sound. That will initialize the patch, and that's pretty crucial. You need to make sure you initialize the patch before you begin to make any synth. Because the default massive patch is actually a bit different from when you click File New Sound. Anyway, what you do is you pitch the first oscillator down -24 semitones, 2 octaves. You pick the AI wavetable, which you'll find under Digital Hybrid toward the bottom, and you change it to a Ben minus plus. You turn the wavetable position to about here, the intensity to about there, pointing at the T, and the amplitude to about 3 o'clock-ish. Then, what you do is you activate the modulation oscillator, move it down to -24 semitones as well, whoops. And you turn on position modulation for oscillator 1. And you move that to about 9 o'clock, I believe. Hang on. Before we do anything else, let's create a macro knob that we can assign to automate all these parameters. Since we're not going to be using vibrato in any of these basses, or this bass in particular, you right click on the vibrato knob and you click clear macro number 1. That'll get rid of any map that was assigned to it. And now we can name this Wub, because, well, it's going to be the Wub knob. You assign that to every parameter on the first oscillator, the wavetable position, intensity, and amplitude, and modulate this one downward to about there-ish. Modulate this one downward just a little bit further. Modulate the amplitude upward. Route it mostly to filter 1, not all the way, but mostly. And then to the modulation oscillator. Position, you grab your Wub knob and assign it to the position knob. Modulate that upward so it's pointing at about the S, and that's you're set for the modulation oscillator. Turn off the noise oscillator, we won't be using that, and leave everything else turned off. Now for the filters. My 2 favorites are band reject and double notch. They're just so great for making growls. So I put a band reject on filter 1 and place a double notch on filter 2. Grab your Wub knob, assign them to the cutoff, the bandwidth, and the resonance of the band reject filter. Whoops. And the cutoff and the resonance of the double notch filter. Wait a minute, yeah, here we go. Now, move this approximately to the middle. Doesn't need to be exact, but you know, I like it perhaps toward serial just a bit more. Oh, series, sorry, not serial. Series. Anyway, move the mix. You need to double click on the slider so it'll move it to exactly the middle position, because we want both filters mixed exactly the same. You want to turn up the volume for the double notch filter all the way. so that they're both routing at equal signal level. Now, leave this where it is, the cutoff, and modulate that downward. Turn the bandwidth to about the same, maybe just a bit less than the position of the cutoff, and modulate that upward, so it's pointing perhaps at the W there. Now move the resonance to a fairly high level, so it's pointing at the thing up here, and modulate this downward, so it's pointing at about the S. Now, for the double notch, you'd want to move the cutoff down just a bit, so it's pointing at nothing in particular, but just about there, and push the modulation up, so it's pointing between the U and the T. This is something you'll have to tune to your own individual liking. I find it sounds best there, but you can do what you want with it. Place the resonance at a relatively low position and modulate that downward ever so slightly. Place a classic tube on effects slot 1. I always just do that. It just gives it that extra crunch. Turn the dry wet so it's pointing at the D, and the drive so it's just before the D. Place a dimension expander on FX slot 2. Bring the dry wet down just a bit, and the size almost the whole way down, so bring it the whole way down first, and then move it up just a couple of ticks, just to give it that extra stereo effect. Activate the EQ, raise the high shelf, boost the low shelf a tiny bit, so it's pointing at the H, and put the boost so it's pointing at the S, and move the frequency so it's pointing at the R in frequency. Now, the inserts. Activate both inserts, and place a sine shaper on insert 1, and a parabolic shaper on insert 2. Move the dry wet to about there, and the drive to about there, and replicate the exact same thing in the parabolic shaper. Believe that's what I did. Yeah, there we go. Now, that's not where it stops though. So we need to go to the oscillator tab, make sure the traversal mode is at equal, and the glide time is about pointing at the E. That'll enable you to do pitch sliding effects that sound just right. Make sure the pitch bend range is an octave up and down, so changes to 12 up and -12 down. Whoops. Turn on restart via gate and move the phasing of oscillator 1 to just before 180, about there. That'll ensure that this oscillator begins at that exact phase every single time, and the growl will sound exactly the same every time you strike the note. So at the moment it sounds like this. And that's actually very loud, so I'm going to route that to my growl channel. But there we go. There's one more thing you need, and that's to go to the voicing tab and increase the unison to 4 voices. That makes it sound just a bit bigger. Change the voicing mode to mono rotate and legato triller. That will enable you to, well, for one, it will make the synth monophonic, so you won't have polyphonic growls because they sound awful. And the trigger mode in legato triller will reset the phasing every time you strike a different note, but while you're doing a portamento slide, the phasing will remain the same, and that's important. So, activate wavetable position, move the slider to about there, assign your wub knob, or any other macro control name that you're using, assign the macro control, and move that all the way down. Oh, geez. Move that all the way down, but not quite enough so that it shows the little gone too far thing there. Just move it so, yeah, just about there. Activate the pan position and double click this slider so it resets to the exact middle position. Then take a different macro knob and assign it to there. Push that up about halfway, and just going to name this pan position, pan pause, and just select keyboard focus again. Name that pan position, and you can modulate this for extra weird stereo effects, but I usually just leave it set about there. As if I were to turn that off. It only makes a difference when you're, yeah, never mind. Just do it, it sounds better when you're using it in the mix. Okay, now it is clipping just a bit, so what we'll do is we turn the master volume down and find the point at which it doesn't clip and just leave it there. And I believe that's it for the massive patch. Make sure the envelope 4, the level is all the way up, and it should be if you press File New Sound. If you didn't press File New Sound, it'll be somewhere around there, and you'll have to push it up yourself. And that's the massive patch, that's it. Okay. Now to get that wub sound, you would create an automation clip for the macro knob and place it in the playlist, like I've done here. The Growl one for macro 2. So I'll delete that now. Now the second part of this bass comes from a Sytrus patch. I made an FM bass patch. I actually got this idea from a guy called Seamless YouTube channel. His Seamless R. I will put a link in the description below. You should check him out because he's absolutely amazing, and he also does tutorials, so you know, just check him out. He's awesome. I'm not going to repeat his tutorials here, but I will basically just give a brief overview of what I did in the Sytrus. In the main section, this X knob is where I assigned all the modulation to, all the automation, and I'll show you how to do that. In operator 1, I left it as a pure sine wave at a ratio of 0.25. Just to give it just to lower the pitches. It's effectively putting it down 2 octaves. Now what I didn't know because I'm not very experienced with Sytrus, I only just learned this a couple of weeks ago. I didn't know there was a pitch knob here. The master pitch, you could probably bring down -24 semitones to bring it down 2 octaves as you would do in massive. If you do that, you only have to bring the ratio down to 1 instead of 0.25, but for these purposes, just do 0.25. That's it for this. Now, you press the mod tab and go to mod X. Sytrus by default, when it unfreezes, Sytrus by default will look like this. One straight red line at the top. To enable this X knob to work, you have to grab this knob and move it all the way down. So if I were to move that all the way up and move the X knob, but if I were to drag this all the way down and then move the X knob, big difference. That's because at this position, there's no modulation on operator 1. At this position, there's full modulation from all determined by the FM matrix. Anyway, let's move on. Operator 2 is, I'm not really sure what I would call this, but it's basically a modified triangle wave. All you have to do that is create a triangle wave by pushing the shape knob up to 25% in Sytrus and move the tension to -8%. I think I did that there. -8. But that's not all. You click Oscillator tab and make sure this bottom phase, along the bottom here, this is the phase of things. And what you would do is grab the phase of the fundamental and move it to about there. So this peak is pointing at the peak in this button. And this is at 0.25 as well, 0.25 times. And the third operator, it's a sine wave. Again, pure sine wave, default at 0.25 times. The fourth operator is a pure triangle wave, done this by moving the shape knob, the shape slider up to 25%, and the ratio is 7.5 times to create rich upper harmonics that give the real FM sound. In operator 5, it's halfway between a triangle and a saw wave, and I did that by putting the shape knob, the shape slider, to about 34%, and the ratio is at 6 times to create just a slightly bit of a different upper harmonic. Operator 6 is just a pure sine wave at 0.25 times, nothing special. Okay, now once you've got all that in, the FM matrix is what you need to mess with. I turned the knob here, modulating operator 1 with 2 to 100%, modulating operator 3 with 2 to 100%, operating modulator 1 with operator 4 to about 40%, operator 5 to operator 3 is at about 40% as well, operator 6 to operator 4 is 100%, operator 6 to operator 5 is 100%, and I've routed both operators 1 and 3 out at about 90% to prevent clipping. If I routed it out at 100, it would clip and sound nasty and distorted. And that sounds like this. And I actually do not automate this at all in the playlist. I just left it at 100% and did the rest through pitch sliding effects, which is achieved by making sure you activate Portamento, this option here in the main window in Sytrus. And yeah, don't change anything here actually. That's the second part done. Now the third part, the vowel sort of growly vowel noise actually comes from a parametric EQ2. If I turn that off and show you what it sounds like, and then I will turn it on and show you it sounds vastly different. Notice how it's got that sort of EO sound. How I actually found out about how to do this in parametric EQ2 was I got a spectrum analyzer, and if you have FL, you're really lucky. One comes built right into the main dash. All you have to do is FL will come default with this waveform monitor here, but you just have to click on that once and it will display spectrum. All I did was sit in front of my microphone like an idiot and sit here going EO, EO. And you will notice that when I do that, if you look carefully, there are two peaks, one in the bass, one in the upper mids, and a sort of notch in the low mid slash mid section. And I will sit here like a stupid person and do that for you now really slowly while you watch this small spectrum analyzer here. I'm pretty sure you can see that clearly, and that is exactly what is happening in this parametric EQ2. I will show you that now. As you can see, it's emulating the shape of my mouth when I do that. So in order to do this in FL Studio, I can't speak for other DAWs, but I know how to do this here, is you would open a parametric EQ2. I'm going to do that for you now. Okay, now for the sake of being organized, let's deactivate all the bands except the ones we're going to use. We're only going to use 2, 4, and 6. So let's deactivate 1, deactivate 3, 5, and 7. And you do this by dragging downward while clicking and dragging downward on these blue things here, these knob things. Now these bands are conveniently placed in exactly the right position. So what you do is you raise each band, you raise band 2 to 12 decibels, and bring the bandwidth down so it's at a sort of, it looks like a notch. Then you would do the same to band 6, raise it to 12 decibels, and bring down the bandwidth so it's a notch. Then you would bring down band 4 to negative 12 decibels, and change the bandwidth so it's a notch, just like the rest. And you get that shape. Now, what you do to create the automation is you just right-click on the frequency knob here and click Create Automation Clip. That will create a brand new automation clip in your playlist that I have conveniently named lol in here. And what you would do is right-click on, let me just resize that, right-click on the place that you wanted to place the automation, so I'm going to choose that point. Make sure it's at the original value, copy value, paste value. Pick the place where you wanted your automation to end, so I'll pick here. And I would suggest moving this to about 50%. Maybe add a bit of tension here if you want, 5% should be enough. I would add there 4, here 4%. Oops. Okay, and let's see. You have to make sure that 2 will line up exactly on the horizontal plane with 4, so let's watch. Perfect. Oh. You may notice that it is fairly loud, actually. What that, because we're boosting 12 decibels, it is increasing the volume by 12 decibels where at these frequency ranges. So what I did to compensate for that was I brought down the master knob here to negative 12 decibels so that these peaks are now at 0 decibels. And basically all we're doing now is cutting frequency, so that'll cause no amplification, no clipping, and you'll still get the effect, but you'll have to turn up this a bit more. But that's okay, you can do that, you can afford to do that. Now you may also notice that only one of the bands is moving. Instead of creating 2 separate automation clips and doing twice the work, all I did was just map this inversely to the first automation clip I did. To do that, all I do was right click on the frequency for band 6, click link to controller, make sure that remove conflicts is turned off. Otherwise you'll only be able to link one parameter to the one controller, and click internal controller and link it to the parametric EQ band 2 frequency. Make sure you put the mapping formula to inverted. Go away. And what that does is when band 2 moves up, band 6 will move down. Watch. And there you go. There's the growl. Thank you for watching and see you later.